A diplomatic breakthrough in the Middle East that could lay the groundwork for ending months of conflict. The US and Iran agreeing to an MOU that would stop fighting on several fronts and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The agreement, brokered by Pakistan and Qatar, is due to be signed in Switzerland on Friday. Islamabad is hailing it as an historic step towards peace. The Pakistani Prime Minister, the first to announce this deal on social media early today, saying both sides had agreed to an immediate and permanent end to military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon. Shortly after that announcement, the US president declaring the deal, quote, complete. He says the Strait of Hormuz will reopen once the agreement is signed, and announced the lifting of the US naval blockade on Iranian ports. Iranian media, meanwhile, reporting maritime fees in the Strait of Hormuz were added to the agreement at the last minute. Tehran also warning Washington against breaching the deal, while insisting Israeli attacks in Lebanon must come to a complete halt. Tehran says further talks are expected within 2 months, with Iran's nuclear program still a key sticking point. And we're joined by Nick Harper, covering the story for CNA in Washington, D.C., and Blake Sifton in Tel Aviv. And I start with you, Nick. Iran's nuclear program, not just a key sticking point, it is in fact the sticking point if we consider that the Strait of Hormuz was not closed before this war started. How can this deal be complete if this nuclear negotiation is still very much in the future?
Well, Donald Trump is certainly spinning this as a win, and it is very significant for him. 2.5 months of ceasefire. At times, it seemed as if both sides would not be able to agree a deal. But the US president says that that has now been done, that it is complete. And bear in mind, that's a big political win for him, because he now has just less than 5 months before the midterm elections in November. He can continue to talk about this deal and how he managed to bring it about. It should help with the global energy crisis, and therefore for those voters in November's election, they will see gas prices at the pumps, in theory, going down, the cost of living decreasing as well. But there are already significant questions about what exactly this deal means. Key Democrats coming forward really saying, was it all worth it? Saying that regime change had not taken place in Iran, and suggesting that a deal that will get done will perhaps be no better than what President Obama managed to negotiate about a decade ago. And bear in mind, it is several days before we get to that, in theory, signing on Friday. There could be a lot of change, push and pull between the US and Iran as they potentially try and change the terms of this deal. So even trying to get to Friday, I think at this stage, will in itself be a win. And then what's in the deal? There's been plenty of conversation, as you mentioned, about the Strait of Hormuz, which was already open before, about the US naval blockade, which will end gradually over the next period. But those other discussions that will then need to take place beyond Friday are very, very tricky. The nuclear program of Iran, its enriched uranium, and those billions and billions of frozen Iranian assets. Will the United States be unfreezing some of those at the beginning of this negotiating period? Many of those questions still remain, and at this stage, the US, if it has the answers, certainly isn't providing them. And then there's also the slight problem that the US and Iran seem to be interpreting this first part in slightly different ways. You mentioned what happens to Lebanon and Israel. Many questions, I think, over the coming days, which will need to become clearer if this is really going to be the win that Donald Trump is portraying.
Thanks, Nick Harper for CNA from Washington, D.C. Blake Sifton now from Tel Aviv. Blake, Nick mentioning what happens on the Lebanese front. We've already heard from the Israeli defense minister.
That's right, Wei Stu. Even though Israel launched this war against Iran along with the U.S., they were not a party to these negotiations. And many in Israel are very unhappy with this agreement for several reasons. Many people here feel that Israel's war aims, none of them have been met. They, of course, included an end to Iran's ballistic missile program, which Israel views as an existential threat, an end to their support for proxies like Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen, and creating the conditions for the downfall of the regime. Now, Iran says the ballistic missile program and their support for proxies are are not included in this agreement and will not be discussed in those future negotiations. And of course, the regime is very much still in power, despite several key leaders being killed. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu has not spoken, notably, since this agreement was announced, but we have heard from other Israeli leaders, including Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich. He called it a bad deal for Israel and the entire free world, and he said, "We will continue the campaign to topple the regime ourselves in creative ways." Now, of course, the other major issue for Israel, as you mentioned, is the war in Lebanon. Both Iran and Pakistan have said that this deal will cease hostilities on all fronts, including in Lebanon. What's unclear at this stage is whether Israel will be pressured to withdraw from the large swaths of territory in southern Lebanon that they have occupied in this war. Today, we heard from Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz. He said that Israel would remain in southern Lebanon indefinitely. And Prime Minister Netanyahu is under quite a bit of pressure from his far-right coalition partners to defy President Trump and possibly any pressure to wind down the war in Lebanon. We heard from far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. He said, Trump's arrangement does not bind us. Israel is not subordinate to the United States. We are an independent and sovereign country. We must not withdraw from any territory in Lebanon.
Well, thanks. That Blake Sifton there reporting, giving the Israeli reaction there for CNA live from Tel Aviv.